You can't control what happens to you, but you can control the story that you tell about it. And when you discover that, you are tapping into a infinite, limitless power. You see, we spend most of our lives seeking power, permission, and authority through external sources. Nancy Pelosi has a great line about this, actually. She says, power is never given. Power must be taken. And the same is true for each of us. Now, here's the good news. You taking power doesn't need to be power over another. You taking power is actually about sourcing power, permission, and authority within yourself, as opposed to being solely dependent on external power, permission, and authority.
Loren Greif has spent a lifetime in corporate and executive search, calling bullshit on stale career advice that most still use. This is Career Blast in a Half, the career podcast for executives ready to cut past outdated career advice to fuel your outcomes now. So let's go.
Welcome back to Career Blast in a Half. And I think this is almost my happiest day of the year. The guest that I have on today is not only a master storyteller, he's also a chocolate fanatic. He is also colorblind and left-handed. And that's just a small part of his story. I'll tell you, we are with Michael Margolis. He is the author of Story 10X. And let me tell you, I think it should be called Story 1000X, because what has happened by virtue of me finding Michael and then reading his book a couple times and then taking a lot of this and repurposing it for our clients has changed their game like at such an exponential level that they're still pinching themselves and the session's been over for days. So Michael Margolis,
Wow.
Thank you so much for just being you and for helping us tell better stories. And can you also fill in some of the blanks that I may have missed about how you got started in Storied, who you've worked with and for, and what your ultimate mission is behind your story?
Yeah, thank you, Loren. We're going to have a lot of fun today, and grateful for us to be able to connect and to connect with your community. So Storied is a narrative transformation company. Big words, but actually a really simple purpose, which is turning tech leaders into master storytellers. We do this today with courses, with coaching and community. For decades, I've been working deep inside the world of tech, inside the most influential companies you can think of: Google, Facebook, Uber, Microsoft, Shopify, and helping those executives build the narratives that drive decision-making on their biggest strategic initiatives, on their go-to-market, on key products, on internal business transformations, change, and so on. And part of my passion in your question about what's this really all towards is, I operate from the place that story is everything. Right? There's a famous quote, the universe is not made of atoms, the universe is made of stories. And whatever problem you face in your career, whatever problem you face in your organization, you can actually solve it by looking at it as a storytelling problem. So much of everything we're dealing with today is about communicating your value, is about differentiation, is about helping to contextualize or explain change, getting buy-in or agreement or investment from other people. It's people skills, power skills, persuasion skills. And these things have never mattered more than ever in this new age of AI disruption and the forces that are at play that's putting a lot of very accomplished senior leaders and mid-career professionals in the messy middle. And so that's a lot of what we're focusing on right now is providing everybody those tools so that you can get unstuck and actually take charge of your story amidst all the presenting constraints. I'll pause there. There's a thousand rabbit holes we could then go into from
Okay,
that.
we're gonna hit some of the rabbit holes, but I also am going to frame this with you as part of breaking down some of the reasons why you said what you said, which is
Yes.
now more than ever, story
Yeah.
matters now more than ever. Why? Why? I know you said AI. Okay, like we get that, right?
Sure.
Like it can be a tool and a threat, right? It can be bad and good. We're not here to necessarily kick the bucket down the AI trail, but we
Yeah.
are here to say there are other things that not only are in your control, but are far more effective
Yes.
than that. And what I want you to share is why.
Yeah. So let's take it from the top. I'm a real first principles type of person and very philosophical with looking at the role of story in our lives. So let's start with you as an individual. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control the story that you tell about it. So the number one determinant of success is the story that you're telling yourself. And the importance of understanding that at a time when we are dealing with not just change, but exponential rate of change. It means we don't know who to trust and what to believe. We don't know which way is up, down, left, or right. We are looking for clarion voices that can actually cut through the noise to help us to orient, to understand where we are and where we're going. And you have to be able to apply that to yourself in order to then also be able to provide that value to others. In terms of really bringing back to your question of like, why does this matter more than ever? So with the disruptive forces that are at play right now, knowledge is dead and wisdom is queen. Let me put it to you another way. There are 1 million, if not 10 million other consultants. There are 1 million, if not 10 million design leaders out there. There's 1 million, if not 10 million SVPs of marketing. How are you going to compete? How do you distinguish yourself amidst all of that noise? They all have the same credentials. They all have all the different accomplishments, but what they don't have, what people can't copy, is your unique story. And so there's this microcosm of the more you understand that story is everything, starting with your own personal story, that is your source of power. And how do you unlock that power? And then once you learn how to think like a storyteller, you can apply that to every aspect of your business responsibilities. How you get executive buy-in, how you turn data into a story, how you sell the future or lead change, how you motivate and inspire others, so on and so on. All the things that are critical to your own success and being able to move forward and have an impact.
So I want to put a pin in this for 1 second.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you please do us a solid
Yeah.
and share the difference between story and narrative?
Oh, yeah.
Because unless I was familiar with you, I would just think that they were one and the same.
Totally. So let me say caveat wise, in reality, we use them interchangeably all the time. And to keep things simple, it's okay. Like, hey, you got to get your story straight. Or what's our story? No problem. But the moment you click down, and if you want to get into the underlying ontology and the metaphysics of power and persuasion, in being able to actually unlock how people are going to perceive, connect, and relate to your message, you have to understand this distinction. So a story is an event. A story is an anecdote. A story is about something that happened. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And by the way, that story can also be about the future, but it's a linear progression. It's a causality sequence. Whereas a narrative is a more abstract concept. A narrative lives outside of time and space. It doesn't necessarily have a clear beginning or an end. A narrative is an open loop, whereas a story is a closed loop. let me start to connect the dots on this. So think of the narrative as a Christmas tree. Stories are the ornaments that go on the Christmas tree. So you need both. Now let me give you an example. The American dream. So the American dream is a narrative. Why is it a narrative? Because it's an abstract concept. And within that abstract concept are a series of different ideas. So what are some of the ideas or ideals that come to mind for you, Loren, around the American dream?
Oh my goodness. Chart your own destiny. Have a house, the white picket fence.
Yeah.
Have a family. Be able to, 2 cars in the garage. All
Exactly.
those kind of cliches or hallmarks that say, yeah, like that's what it is.
So part of the American dream are certain accomplishments or achievements, which you've just named. Part of the American dream is also the ideas of the land of opportunity, or the idea that it doesn't matter where you come from or what family you were born into, that you can come to America and create a better future for yourself and your family. Right? This is a place of reinvention. It's a place of risk-taking, so on and so on. So the American dream, abstract concept, it has a whole bunch of different ideas attached to it. It is the drivetrain of America. And by the way, the American dream also plays out all around the world. So if you're not American, you also have a relationship with the American dream. It may be something aspirational. And you may also have the competing storylines or narratives of, American dream, that's, the story of empire. And, you can have a counter narrative. That's fine. So anyways, American dream, land of opportunity, stories. Well, my American dream story is connected to my father, Jeff, who's a first-generation immigrant born and raised in the bush of Africa. Right? He was born and raised 30 miles from the border with Mozambique in what was Rhodesia or Zimbabwe today, came to the States on a Fulbright scholarship in the early 60s. Right? And from there, he created a new life for himself. My father, and he naturalized as a U.S. citizen. So when the national anthem comes on, my father still cries. He's more patriotic and has a closer relationship to what does it mean to be an American than my mother, who was born and raised in upstate New York. So that's my American dream story. That's part of the American dream as a narrative. And of course, we all have many American dream stories. I could tell you about the American dream stories from my mom's side of the family or in multiple different lineages. So again, narrative is the Christmas tree. Stories are the ornaments that go on the Christmas tree. And what people overlook, so 95% of most storytelling books, storytelling trainings, all the things that people teach around how to use storytelling in business, everybody focuses on stories, stories, stories. Social media, stories. We are swimming, if not drowning, in an infinite sea of stories. And what we desperately want and need are unifying shared narratives. If you learn how to program and communicate at the narrative level, that is the ultimate boss move. That is where the power is. And it's available to all of us.
Okay. Now you got me begging.
Yeah.
Or not begging, but just like more. Right? What is an executive narrative that would be the utopia of where we might all aspire to go?
So it's a great question. Is your question in the context of in career transition to get the next job? Or is it once you are in an executive role and you have to go meet with the executive board and basically pitch them on what's next?
Transition. Let's start with transition because everyone's there.
Right. This is your audience and community. So permission to, can we take the roundabout way there?
Go for it.
Okay. Because no story is a straight line. So here's the first thing that I want to start with if we're going to talk about being in career transition as an executive. And frankly, it's the advice I give to anyone at any stage of career. My number one career advice. Learn the language of the world you want to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
Language equals power. When you speak that language, you have a seat at the table. When you speak that language, you signal that you belong. You signal that you are an insider, not an outsider. And the process of interviewing and ultimately being selected for a job, that courtship process is around language and identity. Oh my gosh, yes, you understand our world. Oh, you understand this industry. Oh, you're fluent in these different languages. And when I say languages, I don't mean that you speak French and Spanish and English. I mean languages as in every craft, every functional discipline and area of specialty is its own language.
Mm-hmm.
So in the world of design leadership is a language that's different than interaction design as a sub-dialect and language that's different than experience design as its own language system, and so on and so on. Everything is language. And so part of this is being able to speak the language of the executive boardroom. And then part of this is being able to speak the language of your functional discipline or the path you've been on, whether you've been a marketer, a data scientist, a product manager, and so on. And then part of this is how many other dialects do you speak that are cross-functional collaboration? If you're a data scientist, the fact that you also speak engineering and marketing, or if you're a design leader, that you also speak the language of HR, people management, and you speak the language of finance, so on and so on. Okay. So that's the first thing. We've got to start with language. Yes.
Okay. I want you to start with language. But how come so much of that language, people think that it's antiquated? So when you are saying you got to speak the language, they're like, duh, Michael, I am speaking the language. I'm a proven executive. I know all the jargon for my industry. I know it. So how do you torture test this for yourself and go,
yes,
am I talking to myself?
Great question. So here's the acid test. There's a few of them. So number one, it's what we call the 90% test. And I describe it in the book, which is how do you get 90% of the room on your side in the first 5 minutes of any presentation? And here's the shortcut answer to it. The way you get 90% of the room on your side in the first 5 minutes is you have to tell a love story about the future.
Ooh, now
and here's what's counterintuitive about that, which is we've all been taught to lead with problem solution, which is fine if you're dealing with a really clear, logical, linear, well-defined problem. I break my arm. Nobody's going to argue, let's take you to the ER. Let's get it x-rayed. We're going to put it into a cast. Really clear problem, solution. We're done. Most of the time, though, as an executive and or if you're looking at a new role that you're coming into, what your job to ultimately solve for are ambiguous problem spaces. They are things that do not have shared problem definition. And third, your audience is often complicit, if not responsible for the problem. So if you start with the problem, you actually are starting from the place unconsciously. What you're saying to your audience is, don't take this the wrong way, but you know that you are wrong, bad, and stupid. But don't worry, I've showed up. I have the answer for you.
I'm your new hero. Well, what you also shared with me in one of the workshops that I went to, which literally is sticking in my brain like bubble gum on my cerebral cortex, is you cannot inspire and judge at the same time.
Yeah, you can't judge and influence at the same time. That's exactly right. Yep.
Yes.
And so this is critical to understand, especially in our attention economy, what we've been through over the last few years, going through COVID pandemic, going through this current economic times. Most people's nervous systems are in a state of hypervigilance. I don't know about you. I've struggled with this. You probably have too. I'm sure most of your clients have too, like burnout, change fatigue, morale, because it's just, we're fried. We've been in cortisol, fight, flight, freeze. and we're seeking dopamine, which is the reward center. But what we also really need is oxytocin, the belonging molecule.
Mm-hmm.
And those three biochemical hormones is actually the biochemical mechanism of what happens when you take in a story. So cortisol, fight, flight, freeze, threat evaluation,
Mm-hmm.
us versus them, friend versus foe. And this is the default state most executives and most leaders are in. And then there's dopamine, which is reward center. What's this going to do for me? Instant gratification. Hey, this needs to ring my bell. And then oxytocin. Oh, we're more similar than different. Oh, we get each other. Trust, rapport, connection. And we're desperately lacking that. And so you have to learn how to work these dials. But so if we understand that this is what's going on, this is the environment that you're communicating into, instead of leading with what's wrong, actually lead with what's right. Tell a love story about the future. What are the possibilities and the opportunities that you see for the brand, for the company, for that role? And then talk about what are some of the things that might stand in the way, the obstacles that stand in the way of that possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And what you do there is you're reversing or reframing the polarity. Instead of minus plus, which is problem solution, you go plus minus. You start with possibility, opportunity, promise, and potential. And if you sell that really well, people go, oh yeah, I see that. Oh, that captures my imagination. Ooh, I'm emotionally invested. I care about that. Okay, now, oh wow, yeah, now I'm motivated. Let's talk about what stands in the way in order to realize that. But most of us we don't organize our business case or the way that we communicate about our role and value or about the vision or strategy in a way that's a love story about the future. 95% of the time, everybody's obsessed with what's wrong, what's broken, what needs to be fixed. And I get it. That's part of the outcome of what you ultimately need to solve for. But it's actually very ineffective for persuading in this communication environment.
I'm so glad that you're talking about this also, because you and I share a combined distaste for things like resumes. And I won't speak for you, but I'm not a fan of job descriptions. And part of the reason why the job description exists is because they have to.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you necessarily, that's not the full story. And what you're there to do, especially at a leadership level, is much, much, much bigger than that list of skills and requirements and all of that. And when you're talking about that love story, it forces you as a leader to actually be able to see a different vision than what is on this piece of paper, which is not what they're going to hire for anyway. It's just going to be a placeholder for them to send out to so-and-so and so-and-so and give you a scope. But sometimes we take that so literally. So I'm so glad that you have broken this all down, because it's been so useful, and I know so useful for this audience. I want to move into one of the things that literally you came here to talk about, and something that you feel very passionately about. And I want to make sure that you explain the what and how behind the inner versus the outer story. The inner story of the two stories that you really need to understand. What are they? How do they coexist? How do they overlap? And what are they, so that we can start to explore them for ourselves?
Yep. Well, so it starts from the following place, which is, if you're in a career transition moment, odds are there's something about your last experience or several of your past experiences at work that you're very dissatisfied with. Mm-hmm. You've got a bone to pick. And part of that bone to pick is that you were not given the power, the authority, or the permission that you wanted or needed in order to achieve the success or the impact that you were responsible for or that you signed up for. Would you say, does that ring true to what you hear in a lot of your, like, if, you know, as you're counseling clients?
A glossary. I wasn't appreciated. I was duped. they told me I was prepared, I was on track for this, and that didn't happen.
Yeah.
I there was, the buy-in that I thought I was going to get to build this team, that just fell apart. And, they were a bunch of smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
They weren't financially solvent to begin with. And when I went through this hiring process, let me tell you, I never saw that coming.
Yep.
We got merged, and, all those redundancies. Thanks so much. I gave you 10 years of my life.
Yeah.
And what did I get? 2 weeks severance. So there is a lot of threads around what happened. And of course, and I never want to do that again.
Yeah. And look, that's, part of the messy middle of life. It's the messy middle that is the core of any story. And it's the messy middle of being a mid-career professional, senior leader, or middle manager, 10, 15, 20 years of experience. We all have these war stories. The challenge, the thing to break through, and this is a fateful choice, which is you can choose to either be the victim of your story or the master of your own destiny. Because storytelling is like fortune telling. It's literally a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
You will find exactly what you're looking for. And when it comes to power, permission, and authority, and let me just be clear, this as I say this, please everyone listening, please do not interpret or take in what I'm saying as victim blaming here. Okay? We all have had horrible, terrible things happen to our lives, and horrible, terrible thing happen to other people's lives. And I'm not here to justify or excuse those things. What I am here to point out, though, is that you have a fateful choice. You cannot control what happens to you, but you can control the story that you tell about it. Mm-hmm. And when you discover that, you are tapping into an infinite, limitless power. You see, we spend most of our lives seeking power, permission, and authority through external sources.
Mm-hmm.
Nancy Pelosi has a great line about this, actually. She says, power is never given. Power must be taken.
Mm.
And the same is true for each of us. Now, here's the good news. You taking power doesn't need to be power over another. You taking power is actually about sourcing power, permission, and authority within yourself. It's internal power and authority and validation, as opposed to being solely dependent on external power, permission, and authority. And if you want proof and evidence of this, simply look at the founders and the executives that you admire. Mm-hmm. I promise you, part of what you admire is their power, their permission, and their authority. And I also promise you that much of the way they source that is through an internal source as much as external source. They believe it. They believe in themselves. They believe in their vision. They believe in their worldview. They have conviction, right? You can't fake or manufacture conviction, but you can actually find and claim conviction through these story-based methods and tools.
Mm-hmm. So that's the inner story.
Oh, that's just the tip of the iceberg of the inner story. Right. But it is that internally sourced power, permission, and authority. It is always available. Mm. You can control it, and it's limitless. And I'll put it another way. The number one determinant of success is the story you tell yourself. That's the inner story. And if you look at high performers, high achievers, the most successful people in life and in work, it's all about the internal narratives they're telling themselves, and or identifying what stories am I telling that are sabotaging myself, or sabotaging my relationships, or sabotaging how I show up and interact with others. The point of all of this is, right now, I know so many people. I was just on the phone earlier today with a dear friend who just got laid off, who's got 15 years experience. He's working in the world of autonomous vehicles, in the world of tech, and he kind of saw it coming, but part of 25% of this company's layoffs, and he's trying to figure out his next. And part of what he's trying to figure out is, do I go and get another full-time role at another company? Right? Or do I go and double down on this startup idea that I've been playing with? Or do I go and become a professional advisor, coach, consultant, where I advise up other people around the thing that I know? Or do I go, and so there is this optionality that everybody's trying to figure out right now, which is, how do you take charge and take control in an environment that has so much uncertainty, so much volatility, and it's not going to be changing anytime soon. This is the driving force of AI disruption. It's fundamentally redefining every category of work, especially knowledge workers. And you need to level up in your ability to rigorously think, make a business case, frame value propositions, people skills, power skills, persuasion skills. All of this is communications: how you write, how you speak, how you think. Very few of us have been trained or prepared for how to do this, but this is what executives are looking for. When they look at, hey, what's someone's ability to go from senior leader to the C-suite? They're evaluating one's ability to zoom out and frame the big picture, to be able to articulate the mental models and criterias for effective decision making, and to think through the different trade-offs, to be able to think about assumptions and how do we test and validate assumptions. It's very high level thinking, and then be able to drill it all the way down the line to what does it actually look like at the execution and tactical level, including how we measure it, how we track it, and so on, and your ability to then motivate and inspire others to execute on it. This is a very complex set of skills to master that have very little to do with the technical skills that you've developed competence in, that you have expertise and confidence about, that was your original profession, your original craft or discipline, right? As you're moving along in your career, it matters less and less depends on the technical competencies. It matters more and more the influencing competencies. And that divide is getting wider and wider of, you need to be able to make that leap to level up. Otherwise, you are going to get cycled out. And I see this happening. This is one of the new defining issues, I think, of our time. And, how do you, again, just learn how to think like a storyteller? Because that's the critical component for sourcing your own inner authority, and then also being able to effectively be the director or the narrator of the journey to whatever executives and or other cross-functional stakeholders that you need to enroll and get buy-in from and bring them along into that future.
I literally could listen to your narratives, your stories, your tales, your fables all day long. I'm like glued and riveted.
Well, should we share some fuck up stories? Why don't we go there, Loren? Like, let's talk about the twists and turns and the shit pies along the way, because it's not all sunflowers and lollipops.
Okay.
And I'm happy to share.
What's the trigger? What fuck up story about what?
There's so many. I don't know.
Oh my God. I have a million of those too.
Oh my goodness. Well, so I can share with everybody that 10 years ago. So right now, let me just share, in the last 18 months, our business at Storied went from a multi-7-figure consulting business. It cratered and collapsed on itself as the tech industry collapsed on itself. I saw it coming. So I was like, oh, okay, there's some weird things going on, but selling multi-6-figure professional services, consulting, these strategic narratives inside, the Googles and the Facebooks of the world. I don't want to be in that business anymore. And I certainly don't want to be in that business in 12 or 18 months. I had 10 full-time staff, a lot of infrastructure and so on, and recognized with AI disruption being here, this was going to change everything. So let's productize the IP. Let's democratize the methods. So this is why we have cohort-based courses. I do one-on-one private coaching. We're later this coming year, we're going to go into group coaching as well. We have, and we're really basically building a path to become a certified master storyteller and to apply that in the world of business. But this is not some new thing for me. So let me just share, and I've been doing strategic planning with the team. We've been looking back at old documents and whatever else from 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Jody, who's my right hand, has been with me on and off for close to 15 years. And she left during COVID for a few years to take on some other opportunities and came back about 1.5 years ago. So she's our VP of community. She and I have this very tight, long history. And we were looking back at things. And, in 2014, we went all in on online education. Okay, we're going to build the learning platform. This is the storytelling revolution, or it's the gold rush. We're going to be in the picks and shovels, but we're like the Levi's. We're in the picks and shovels business. We're going to tool people up. We made every mistake in the lean startup playbook. And after, being several $100,000 sort of in Schitt's Creek of the wrong investments, the wrong choices on a whole bunch of things, we pulled the escape hatch and stripped everything back down to the studs. And I went on a walkabout. I sold 90% of everything I owned. I lived out of 2 carry-on bags for 500 days around the world. I went on a story world tour. So I was teaching our methods and tools in 15 different countries in major creative innovation hubs on the Chitlin circuit, so to speak. You familiar with the Chitlin circuit?
No.
All right, so the Chitlin circuit is this really cool thing. Back in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, if you were African-American jazz, blues performer, you couldn't play in a lot of venues because of the race laws. And so there was this circuit, though, called the Chitlin circuit that was down in the American South, that was in Alabama, Mississippi, the Panhandle, Texas, and so on. And these were chicken shacks, these were juke joints, and you would go and you could play every night, and then you would sleep in the next day, and then travel to the next town and play again and again. And so the Chitlin circuit is where most of just about every famous African-American jazz, blues, and soul performer that are household names today from the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s, it's where they all went to earn their chops before they became legendary household names. So that's what I did. 2015, I'm still not the legendary household name, but I went on the Chitlin circuit, which was, all right, I'm going to say yes to every gig. I'm going to travel around the world because we built a social media presence and so on. Everywhere we went, there was someone we knew. And because I was doing something that was such a bold declarative act, I would drop into a city like Melbourne, Australia, or Amsterdam, and I'd be given the keys to the city. Because people would hear about what I'm doing and they're like, oh, I want to host you. Oh, let's make this thing happen. Or we're going to have this event and so on. So I had the time of my life. Wasn't very profitable, but I'd stripped everything down to the studs. It was fine. And it was out of those ashes of that original failure during that time, actually, about halfway through, out of the blue one day, I got an email from a head of product at Facebook. And that head of product said, hey, look, here's what we're up to. We've got a really massive vision for building the next generation of this product. We've done the front end of innovation, the UX research, all this kind of stuff. We've got this big thing, but right now our product is a red hair stepchild in Facebook's family of apps. And we need to go in front of Zuck and sell him on the future and present all of this. Long story short, it was actually the shortest business development sales call of my life, less than 30 minutes. And the reason why was because French tech mafia. So it just so happens Alex, who was talking to me on this call, he had gone to our website because he had just been searching storytelling, narrative, whatever else. He discovered our website, and on our website, he saw Stefan, who was one of his old mates from the French tech mafia, and Stefan was listed there as one of our clients. So he called up Stefan. He's like, hey, Stefan, you're on these guys' websites. What do you know about them? And Stefan's like, oh, these guys are, they're lit. So anyways, Alex calls me from Facebook, 20-minute conversation. And really the punchline was, can you start next week? That led to career defining journey for me. We've since worked with 15 product and organizational divisions at Facebook and Meta, building the narratives that go in front of Zuck, that went in front of Cheryl, that go in front of Chris Cox, the chief product officer, that go in front of Javi, the COO, influencing billions and billions of dollars of their most strategic investments, from groups to newsfeed to monetization to social impact, you name it. But it all came out of my willingness to strip everything down to the studs and go on a walkabout where, no, there's something that, okay, I don't quite know the right form and the format of it. This didn't work, but I know that there's an inherent source code that's at the core of this, and let me go figure out another way to express it. So that led us to then build out all the professional services for many, many years. And now full circle, we're coming back to, all right, the global learning community with a new product market fit, working with tech leaders who want to become master storytellers, but the product builders, product design, marketing, and so on, and all of the things that we've been talking about, but at a different place and stage in the world as well, right? The world kind of needed to mature where through disruption and change and all these things, what we do matters more than ever. So that was a long and windy story, but one where, actually, I'm curious, out of everything that I shared, what are 3 invisible lines of connection? As you heard that, you went like, oh, yeah, me too. Or, oh, that's an interesting, like you started connecting the dots. If you're willing to share on the spot, what are 3 things where you found yourself in it?
I love playing spontaneous games.
Yeah.
But the first thing I wanted to say is I was going to ask you what the moral of the story is. Don't tell me. And what I am going to offer you is first the 3 lines, and then we'll go to the moral of the story.
Perfect.
The 3 things were a plot twist. Everything's going along just fine, and the shit hits the fan, right? Like that conflict, right? Conflict.
Yes.
You can't have a great story. That's what my teacher, Michael Margolis, told me. You can't have a great story if it just like goes along and everything's great. Right. So the conflict came in. And the hero redemption, right? Here you are out in the world doing this wild and crazy thing, right? You said like down to the studs, like out of the ashes. So, the hero's journey of all these unexpected things are going on, but it doesn't stop our hero. And then the second and the final thing is a different level of clarity, redemption, hope, renewal, and all of those things which are core and central to every story, whether you see it right now or not, right? They exist. You got to hang around for the miracle. So what's the moral to that story?
Choose the path of least permission.
I normally ask some signature questions. We don't have time, but what I do want to ask you, first of all, we'll make sure all your links and courses and everything will be there. And don't people go buy this book right now. Like seriously, Believe Me is his first one, correct? And then Story 10X. Yeah. At some other point in time, I'm going to invite you back. And I really hope that we can continue to do this because given the fact that storytelling is so integral to our lives and to our careers, we'll be able to break these down into other subsets of conversations, new chapters coming soon. Yes. So please, everyone, stay tuned. And again, Michael Margolis, thank you beyond thanks for just you in every big way. And please, everybody who stayed around for this half of the episode, thank you for doing that. And also don't forget to write an Apple podcast review so that Michael can get some shout outs and also so that we can help grow this podcast.
Loren, do we have time? Can I share one closing thought?
Sure thing.
I want to offer everybody the following reference point as well, which is I shared with you a vulnerable story about where I was 10 years ago. But I also want to share with you that in the last 6 months, I beat cancer, I pivoted my business, and I became a new dad. And I share these things not for like, woe is me or pin a rose on my nose, but rather to remind all of you, life is a full contact sport. It will always be coming at you. And it's being able to cultivate that inner presence of being, to celebrate the feast, to find the gifts, that resilience, that buoyancy. Right? I am an indomitable force in spirit. Loren, you are as well. And I know that you attract people who are indomitable spirits, and you help people find the indomitable spirit within themselves when people have lost connection or started to doubt that indomitable spirit. But that's, at the end of the day, I think why you and I are, twin powers activate, brother, sister from another mother, because this is your currency, everybody. Your story is your currency, but it's understand life will make you and break you, but the things that break you can remake you, which is why you need to learn how to think in story, because it's not a prescribed thing, right? Like there are certain stories you're telling yourself, there's certain stories I'm telling myself that are my greatest source of suffering. I've been trapped in those stories for years, decades, or my whole life. And then there are other stories I've been telling myself that have been my source of liberation, my source of power, my agency, my confidence, my conviction, my gift, my superpowers. See, story is the feature and the bug of humanity. So what's important is don't put labels on good or bad or right or wrong when you make sense of your past. You can't change what happened. It is what it is. What you can do is look at what you want to do going forward. And so the question simply becomes, with any story that you're telling, are you telling the right story for the future that you want to create? That's all it is. Right? And you have the power to choose, back to what you were saying earlier, Loren, right? Storytelling is just circumstance, choice, consequence, rinse and repeat. There's no good or bad choice. There's no right or wrong choice. It's just a choice that has a consequence. Keep learning and growing. You got to pay for your education. And in the words of Ibn Battuta, who's a famous Sufi traveler, kind of a Marco Polo figure, he says, travel leaves you speechless, and then you have stories to tell.
Ooh, I love that one. We'll see you soon, everyone. Thanks again for joining. And Michael, thank you.
Metaphors be with you.
Thank you for joining today. We appreciate your listening ears. Big time. We ask this: use these tools, not tomorrow, right now, and share them by spreading the love, leaving us a rating and subscribe so you don't miss the next Career Blast in a Half. Most of all, thank you for you.